Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. Today, my guest is Carlene Bermann. She's the executive director of the St. Lawrence County Center for History and Culture. Many people know it as the County Museum and/or the St. Lawrence County Historical Association, which was its old name. Carlene, welcome back to North Country Matters. I'm looking forward to our conversation today about the National Historic Markers here in the county.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure. So the reason that we're going to be talking about historical markers here in the county is that you're about to unveil a brand new one. You will have a dedication ceremony for the new Rossie Pomeroy historic marker on May 16th, with a longer tour there in July in partnership with the Adirondack Agricultural Architectural Heritage, excuse me. So let's start off by talking about historical markers in general. You can't go anywhere in this county without spotting one of these blue and yellow signs. They function as kind of a historical teaser, giving a short description of the location, the time frame, and the significance of a site in local history. So do you have any idea how many historical markers there are here in St. Lawrence County?
That is a great question, Donna. I actually didn't know for sure, but I did a little bit of research. So just to clarify for your listeners, most of the markers are blue and white. You might see some other colors, and that is because historic markers have been placed by different groups at different times. So I guess, more traditional, what we think of as the original New York State historic markers were actually granted by the state education department. That program started in 1926 and lasted until 1939, and then the funding was actually cut for the program. So there was a period of several decades when there were no markers being granted. And then for a brief period in the 1960s, you did see some kind of sporadically being granted for special projects, special things to commemorate. So there's many different iterations of these markers. And then several more decades went by. There was a gap where there weren't really historic markers being granted unless a group would, raise funds to basically contract with a foundry to have them made themselves. So you do see some of those that are kind of outliers as well. But an official program started again in 2006 by the Pomeroy Foundation. So there were long periods of time when there weren't markers being granted. So the ones that you see around may be part of that original iteration, placed by the state education department, which includes the marker we have here in front of the Silas Wright House.
Mhm.
That was part of that early granting. And then some of the newer ones you see in the county, are from the Pomeroy Foundation or maybe even local groups who've raised money. So to my best guess, there was a list compiled by the New York State Museum in 2013, that did list 26 historic markers in St. Lawrence County. Those were part of the original New York State Ed Department grants. There have been over 20 that have been granted by Pomeroy since then. So I think we're close to 50 here locally.
Okay, that's really interesting. I actually have one of the newer ones right down the street from my house commemorating the Crane School, where that was founded. So I have one right in my neighborhood, and that's one of the Pomeroy ones. So tell us a little bit about your collaboration with the Pomeroy Foundation to install these markers. What is the Pomeroy Foundation, and what is their part in the collaboration?
So the Pomeroy Foundation, which was started by a man named William Pomeroy, William G. Pomeroy, they are located out of Syracuse, and their original intention was to basically commemorate. So it's a private foundation, again, founded in 2006. They commemorate historic people, places, things, and events. The metric moves each year, but this year it's the period of 1683 to 1925. So things have to be at least 100 years old or more to be considered historic by their standards. So there's an application process you can go through. They have several different types. I think it's 5 or 6 different programs that they'll grant markers for. Um, there's one for food history. There's one called Legends and Lore. They do one just about, military history. And then ours is part of the larger, more popular, general state historic grant program. So I believe to date they've granted over like 1,100 markers just since 2006. And then I believe there's about 2,800 that exist for like all of New York State, um, when we're talking about the historic markers as well. So it's a pretty seamless process at this point. I believe their application's open twice a year. You can find out more information on their website. You do need to be a historian or a not-for-profit, historical society to apply. It's not something that individuals can apply for. So our role as a historical association, and at different times we've worked with historians in the area as well to, commemorate these particular parts of history. And I believe in our history that we've applied for 4 or 5. This is the second marker we've gotten since I've been here. We got one for Russell last year, commemorating a historic person in Russell. So yes, we could apply for more each year. It's just a matter of there's a lot of documentation that's required, and it's quite an extensive process.
That makes a lot of sense because you don't want to go to the trouble and the expense of creating one of these without having a solid foundation of historical provenance. So tell us a little bit about the Rossie marker. It actually encompasses a number of historic sites in that area of the county. Tell us what visitors can expect to see when they take that little tour in July.
Yes, so the main things that Rossi is commemorating are the iron and lead industries that were really started not the very first place in the county, but one of the earliest locations for our county and even for the whole country that were really a significant site of mining for iron ore and lead that became a production where hundreds of men were working, in these foundries and processing ore that was shipped off to other parts of New York, and used locally and in other parts of the country. So we are just going to be focusing on it was a sort of a two-part operation. The iron ore was the first processing that happened in Rossi. And then a few decades later, when lead was discovered, that became the next major industry. They are separated by a space of about a mile in Rossi itself. We will just be focusing on the iron sites for this tour. So people can expect to see the ruins of the foundry and machine shop, which date to the 1840s. They were likely not the first iterations of those buildings, but those are the ruins that remain. There was the site of the iron furnace. There's not a lot you can still see there except part of a wall, but that was one of the original buildings from 1813. And they can also see the land office that David Parrish, who is really credited for establishing these industries, where he worked, they will see as well. That is a private residence currently. And finally, the ruins of a grist mill that actually predates the current iron buildings from 1825. So that is what we will be giving a tour on. We have some historic images to show from different types, different times in those buildings' history. And we expect the tour to take about 30 to 45 minutes.
Okay, and of course, David Parrish is very famous in St. Lawrence County. The town of Parrishville is named after him, and he was a real mover and shaker, wasn't he, back in the early days of the county?
He sure was, and he's actually credited for the very first mining. He emigrated here from Germany, and he started the very first documented instance we've found of really a big operation in the county is the iron ore that came out of Somerville, and that was in 1809. So we moved from there to Rossi about 5 or 6 years later.
So geologically, St. Lawrence County is quite rich, isn't it, in these kinds of resources, and they were identified early on and became important economic drivers, weren't they?
They sure have. And for the southwestern part of the county in particular, that area is very rich geologically, just due to the nature of how the land was originally formed. So some particularly notable places, I already kind of referenced Somerville, which is kind of the first documented place that iron ore was discovered. And then we have Rossi. Some other significant places include the Brazier Iron Works, which was really established around the 1830s. There was a lot of stuff that really came around that time period. Clarksboro was another big area in the 1860s. And then as we move into more modern times, we have Benson Mines in Star Lake, which a lot of people know of, and that employed tons of people. Of course, they were focusing really on zinc and talc. And then, of course, Balmont, which is still a functioning mine in the Fowler area, started as a zinc mine, but as a byproduct of that zinc production, They've found all kinds of amazing, gem quality specimens that have come out of that mine, are still coming out of that mine. And I know they're below the 4,000 level now. So much less so than it was historically, but we still have some significant geological resources here. And certainly, so what we're most well known for, of course, we've mentioned iron and lead historically, talc, zinc, marble, mica, and pyrite were also all significant things that were mined here in this area.
That's right. There's an awful lot of the Governor marble in various buildings around the county, that's for sure. So one of the treasures of the county museum is your rock and mineral collection. Tell us a little bit more about that and what people can expect to see who come and want to look at that part of your collection.
Yes, so I would love to think of it as a treasure. It's actually a fairly new part of our collection, just due to my own interest in rocks and minerals and these tours that we've been doing. I've been trying to grow this collection. So historically, we really only had a few things that could be considered geological specimens, and most of our collection related to some materials, some stone tools, and indigenous artifacts that were actually uncovered in the 1950s. And we've just been adding slowly as people have donated specimens. So a few things that are from, the Balmont, Benson mine areas, a lot of things that I've actually collected personally, through my association with the St. Lawrence County Rock and Mineral Club and the different trips that we've done. So it's a very small collection currently, but one we are certainly looking to grow, and we would love, if people have anything they would like to contribute that came from St. Lawrence County.
Oh, that's great. And I know the Rock and Mineral Club is very active and they do a big show every year there in Canton. So, and it seems to attract an awful lot of people with your same interest. So, you mentioned a little bit before about how can someone suggest to you a potential site or an event for a historic marker so that you can sort of help shepherd the paperwork through the Pomeroy Foundation?
Sure. So the marker that we actually established last year in Russell was one of our members who brought that to our attention. It was one of her ancestors, based on research she had been doing. So certainly, the community are the best source of information. This is their history. We are here to support everyone's history, and I'm still new to this area myself, so I'm certainly not the one to, be the expert on what are the things we should be commemorating. I want that to come from the people who are living those experiences. So we are working on a more formal application process that people can download from our website. When we have that available, we will post it. We'll share it on our media channels. But really, if you have any ideas for something that you think would make a good Pomeroy marker, you can certainly email us or call us. You can contact me directly. And as I mentioned, there is quite a bit of research that goes into it. Pomeroy has an application that's required, which you do need a lot of primary source documentation, which is often the biggest challenge in the process. So that is something we can help with. But ideally, if someone is suggesting a site for a marker, we would love it if they also have some, research that can go along with that they can provide for why this in particular is a good marker. And Pomeroy likes to avoid, things that are too specific to maybe one particular person. It does need to have larger significance to the area. So it could be a person, but, maybe not just anybody who lived here, somebody who was really a founder of an area or, had a larger significance.
Hmm. Okay, good. So these obviously these signs are metal. They're made to last. They're produced in a foundry, and there has to be a cost associated with that. How does that part of the process work in terms of the costs to create one of these?
Yes, so the great thing about what the Pomeroy Foundation does, by taking up this, this hole that was left when the education department no longer granted these markers. Why this application process is so intense is because it does include funding for the marker, which I think the current expense is somewhere around $1,600 per marker. So they contract with a foundry that I believe is in Ohio. They send you the paperwork, you then Once your marker is approved and all of the wording and everything is approved, basically you are in touch with the foundry directly to confirm, they send you a draft, make sure this is what it all needs to look like. And then part of what that grant award is also includes the shipping, which is certainly no small expense because
Mm.
these are solid, cast iron, they weigh a lot. So the marker gets delivered to your location, and then it is up to the grantee, in this case us, to get the marker installed. So they provide you with a post and with the main marker. Um, and in this case, we worked with the town of Rossie, who very generously, mounted the marker for us and installed it in its location that we had identified with them of where it would go.
Okay, thanks. That's a very comprehensive process, and obviously they take it very seriously as they should. So, what does the St. Lawrence County Center for History and Culture have planned for the summer and fall when a lot of people will be visiting St. Lawrence County now that the weather's nice?
Yes, we are very, very excited about the weather and trying to get outside as much as possible. So this time of year, we really focus our energies on a lot of outreach. We try to get out and about around the community. So we will be tabling at a number of events and festivals this summer. Luckily, I have interns who can help with that work. And then more of these types of programs. So we will be doing some on-site programs at the museum, but we're going to be focusing a lot on our historic garden. There's a lot of plantings we want to do on site to develop that further, programming around that, and then more of what I'm calling these history adventure tours, things like Rossie, where we can actually get out and about, take a hike, go on a kayak, something to see this history that it's just a lot more potent when you can experience it firsthand than to just read about it or hear somebody talk about it.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, all of these details are on your website. So, Carlene, just in the last few seconds here, tell us how people can support the work and the mission of the museum. You can join as a member, you can become a sponsor, make donations. How does all that work?
Yes, so there are many different routes to get involved. We're always looking for volunteers, to assist as well in our many different projects. You can find out more information on our website. You can email us at info@slcha.org. If you have specific questions, that goes to all of the staff and we can get you to the right person. But yes, we're always looking for new members. We're working on developing our sponsorships more to really be tied to specific projects that you can help to fund. We're also often taking donations of supplies, whether it's plants for the garden or education materials. So if you can't necessarily donate money, maybe you're spring cleaning and have some things, and we'll be putting up a wish list for that as well. And then we just love even if you want to leave us a review or come to one of our programs and participate that way, friend us on Facebook, any kind of engagement we appreciate.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today, Carlene, and talking about this. These historic markers, as I say, they're everywhere and they catch people's eye, and it makes you want to learn a little bit more about the place, the time, and the people. So it's interesting to find out what that process has been all about. So we'll definitely have you come back and talk to us again about some of your ongoing projects. And I just so much appreciate you giving us the time today.
Thank you so much for having me on, and it was really a pleasure talking about the history of historic markers. And we hope that you guys can make it this Friday. So the dedication ceremony will start at 10 in Rossie. We have the information on our Facebook page, on our website. If you were not aware, we put it out in different media sources as well. So 10 o'clock will start the ceremony. Shouldn't take too long, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll be doing the walking tour afterwards, and it's all free.
Yeah, and that's always a draw. It's always a draw. So thanks again. I want to remind our viewers that these conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Museum. Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters.